India imposes direct rule over Jammu and Kashmir. The government says it's worried about human rights, but is it actually a power grab? I'm Imran Garta, and today's newsmaker is Indian-administered Kashmir. The United Nations has called for an investigation into human rights abuses by India and Pakistan in Kashmir. In a new report, the UN blames India for using excessive force against civilians during protests and Pakistan for its continued support of militants in the region. India says the report is rubbish and disavowed the allegations. But that didn't stop New Delhi from making its own similar accusations against its coalition partner governing Kashmir, the People's Democratic Party. India's ruling BJP pulled out of the coalition, causing the government to dissolve and the BJP-backed governor to take over. Looming over the political unrest are next year's elections, and critics of the Indian government say that's not a coincidence, claiming Prime Minister Narendra Modi is using the turmoil to gain points with voters. Randolph Nogel reports.
It was the first Ramadan truce to be declared along Kashmir's disputed border in nearly 18 years. And it didn't last long. Violent protests soon broke out again within the Indian-administered part of the region, the state known as Jammu and Kashmir. According to Indian police records, dozens of people were killed during 30 days intended to be a period of peace. Among the dead, 6 civilians, 9 security personnel, and more than 20 rebel fighters, most of whom were killed along the line of control, which divides the Indian and Pakistan-administered parts of the disputed territory. A prominent journalist, Shujat Bukhari, was also killed in the region's capital city of Srinagar. A day after Ramadan ended, the Indian Army stepped up its anti-rebel operations. And with the security situation spiraling, a political alliance that provided a glimmer of hope for peace talks is now at an end.
This is not a conflict frozen in time. It is a conflict that has robbed millions of their basic human rights and continues to this day to inflict untold suffering. It is essential that the Indian authorities take immediate and effective steps to avoid a repetition of the numerous examples of excessive use of force by security forces in Kashmir.
Those comments echo the findings of a landmark report from the UN, which criticizes Indian security forces. It may have been the straw that broke the back of a tenuous political partnership. Shortly after Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi came to power in 2014, his Hindu nationalist BJP government formed an alliance with Kashmir's most prominent mainstream political party, the People's Democratic Party, or PDP. But even from the beginning, the alliance was seen by many as likely to fail. The BJP advocates a hardline approach to policing Indian-administered Kashmir, whereas the PDP favors reconciliation and dialogue. The report is widely seen to have forced the issue in calling on the ruling BJP to reevaluate the controversial Public Safety Act and the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Critics of the laws say they allow for arbitrary detentions in Indian-administered Kashmir and exempt Indian military personnel there from criminal prosecution. Now some fear the BJP will take an even harder approach to suppressing dissent in a region where 70 years on, an independence movement shows no signs of backing down. Randolph Nogel, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Paris is the spokesman for the ruling BJP, Syed Zafar Islam. In Srinagar, the spokesman for the People's Democratic Party in Jammu and Kashmir, Wahid Para. And also in Srinagar, human rights lawyer Parvez Imroz. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Wahid Para, let me begin with you. Did that UN human rights report bring down your government and cause your split with the BJP?
Well, human rights issue is a concern for J&K government. It has always been, irrespective of the parties in power. It is a cause of concern that we always try to have, maximum restraint. But there is a problem in Kashmir. There is a genesis to the problem, which is a political problem. We try our level best to maintain law and order, but in response to the breach of law and order, you still have some cases. And in past cycle of violence, there have been some sort of excesses also. I will not deny that, but it's the cause of concern. Not that has been the reason for fall of government or anything. There are other political reasons for the fall of government. But yes, human rights in Jammu and Kashmir is a very serious cause of concern, irrespective of parties who are in power in J&K or for the larger government of India also. We try our level best to
Right.
show maximum restraint during dealing the cases of law and order. But still, we are not always, it's not so
Okay.
easy when you deal with such situations. There are cases of infiltration, there are ceasefire
Right.
violations, there are serious cases of
Understood.
law and order also.
And those are,
And
I'm understanding you're trying to contextualize it for me, but what's interesting is the BJP has now imposed direct control and you're not at the table anymore. I want to bring in the human rights lawyer, Pervez Imroz here. I want to ask you, Mr. Imroz, what you first of all think about the UN Human Rights Report, and secondly, the BJP's response to that and everything that's played out since then.
You see, the Human Rights Commission report, the worst fears of the Indian government. The Indian government has never ever wanted that the human rights situation in Kashmir should get international. And for the first time, the OHCHR, or the High Commissioner of Human Rights, acknowledged that because the government of India refused them to give access to fact-finding, so they were forced to go for a remote monitoring, which they have been doing in other areas also. So for the first time that the international institution, United Nations, has acknowledged that there are massive human rights violations in Kashmir, and for which they have recommended the Human Rights Council that there should be a thorough and comprehensive independent investigation in all the crimes. Because I, as a human rights defender, working in Kashmir for the last 30 years, believe, and as a Kashmiri, that the suppression and oppression in Kashmir is systematic and institutional, right? All the institutions are part and parcel of it, including the politicians who have been ruling Kashmir. And rightly said by the report that India is not, not a single perpetrator have been punished, because the army has the Armed Forces Special Powers Act where they have complete impunity. And particularly the BJP government here right now, the way they are giving complete the moral impunity also to the armed forces here. You take the case of the army Major Gogoi, that who forcefully forced a guy Kashmiri for using him as a human shield, and how they,
So allow me to come in here for a second, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to bring in Syed Zafar Islam. So we have this UN Human Rights Report. It's scathing. It also looks at the alleged crimes of the Pakistanis, but we're focusing on India now. And it talks a lot about chronic impunity, violations committed by security forces, and so forth. Your government comes out, says it's fallacious, tendentious, and motivated. Such language that makes one think that the BJP doth protest too much. And then you impose direct rule over Jammu and Kashmir. That's not a good look, is it?
Well, let me respond to both the questions you have posed to me. First of all, yes, indeed, this report is malicious. This report is baseless. This is absolutely motivated.
Motivated by what?
Because it is away from the reality, and it is just motivated by the Human Rights Commissioner of the United Nations is only projecting a situation which is contrary to the ground reality. And it is very unfair on his part. I must tell you that it is very unfair on his part to publish this report, which is absolutely baseless. This ground reality is very, very different there. There is a terrorism. There is a neighboring country, Pakistan, which there are so many terrorist organizations there. They are trying to radicalize, push the terrorists inside the Indian territory. And these people are up to terrorist activities all the time. And Indian government, Indian security forces are dealing now only sternly with these terrorist organizations and terrorists who are coming to India. And there are people who are trying to radicalize the youth of Jammu and Kashmir, because you must know the youth of Jammu and Kashmir, they want to be part of India. They want to be part of mainstream of India. That's why we had... no, because we interact with people. We interact. If you just see the person the lieutenant who has been killed by the terrorist or recently, his father, and the number of people who came to attend his funeral, all the youth, they always speak. They speak against against Pakistan, against the terrorist organization.
Do you think those youths certainly, do you think those youths who have suffered the pellets in the face, who have been gunned down, do you think they still want to be a part of India just for protesting?
Well, let me also ask you. See, this is the mildest way to deal with people who are actually throwing stones at the security forces.
By blinding them.
And anywhere other part of the country, if such situation has ever arisen, the security forces have dealt very sternly and very mildly in Jammu and Kashmir, because...
But let me ask you, just because it's stern and harsher elsewhere, is it okay to blind protesters for protesting against Indian rule and maybe throwing stones? Is it justified to blind them?
No. No, let me ask you a very direct question. That the separatist forces who are sitting there and giving their financial support, moral support, emotional support, and misleading these people. Misleading. I'm telling you that the parent ask their parents.
They're quite terrible as separatist forces giving financial support if the best they can give these people is stones, right? If you're telling me the separatist forces arming these people, the best they can do is stones. They're pretty horrible as
arming these people
forces.
with the stones, arming these people with arms, arming these people
but
with...
we were talking about stones. You mentioned stones
and
first
misleading
up.
them.
You mentioned stones first up. You're saying separatist forces financially arming these people with what? With stones. And these kids are being blinded, some are being gunned down. But I want to go back to Wahid Para here. Wahid, I want to bring you in here.
No, let me
hold on for a second.
Just complete.
Saeed Zafar Islam, just a second. I want to bring in Wahid because Wahid was your partner in government in Kashmir. Now, Wahid, your PDP is not at the table anymore. Tell me what's your problem with the BJP?
Look, there's no doubt that it took Kashmir human rights. There is an internal and external angle. There are political realities. There is a problem in Kashmir, and this is, goes back to 70 years. So Kashmir needs a political solution that we as a political party has been asserting, and we always say that there is a democratic way to achieve that goal. Where the challenge comes is that the larger BJP, which we've been talking to BJP also, is that there is the requirement for initiative of talks, dialogue, internally and externally. You need to talk when you say Pakistan is infiltrating or Pakistan is interfering. We want to talk to Pakistan on those issues as well. We also want to talk to the separatist leaders, which we have been consistently pursuing to the BJP and the larger mainstream. We had an agenda of alliance with BJP where we discussed every issue that all stakeholders, irrespective of ideologies, and all stakeholders, irrespective of their views, need to be engaged for a political solution. Now, the challenge with BJP comes is because BJP is a larger nationalistic political party. Their constituency is different. They don't want to be engaged in many ways with separatists in the locality, and they also don't want to be seen engaging with Pakistan in some times. So there has been consistent initiatives from us, and to some extent, BJP's in central leadership did respond. They appointed an interlocutor. They initiated talks. They announced a ceasefire. They also initiated talks with Pakistan. It didn't work up because peace in Jammu and Kashmir has always been seen through events, and these events will not help. It needs a consistent engagement. It needs a consistent process. Unless it's not a sustainable process, you are not going to resolve this problem. You are not going to end. Human rights will happen. Deaths will take place. We will continuously shift blames on each other. But the reality is that, yes, people are dying on the both sides, and people are getting killed every day. We all may be responsible. We need to introspect a serious session. Yes, there is an external angle. Pakistan's involvement is there on the human rights part. But should we wait for that, or should we initiate something to save our own people? That's a larger question that we all need.
It's good to know where you stand. I want to bring in Pervez Imroz. Pervez, you have a member of the BJP on the panel here. You're in the valley. You believe there are human rights violations taking place right there. He believes that this is justified because of a terror threat and because of the context that he paints. I want you to talk to him directly. Talk to Saeed Zafar Islam directly. Tell him why you think you're wrong. He's wrong, rather.
No, I will be telling one thing, that...
I cannot...
I'm saying tell him why you think he's wrong. He clearly disagrees with you. So, Pervez, go ahead. Address him directly.
No, I'm not. I'm not going to address him directly. I'm telling you that as far the report is concerned, this report, rejecting this report was expected on expected line. A country which is aspiring to become the permanent member of the UN Security Council has been rejecting it. If we see that the government of India's conduct, for example, you see the OIC, Organization of Islamic Countries, wanted to come here and have fact-finding. India rejected. The European Parliament passed a resolution in 2008 for urging government of India to conduct investigation in mass graves, right? They rejected it. These special rapporteurs, we have United Nations mechanisms like special rapporteur on the human rights, on the disappearance here, because we have 8,000 disappearance here and 7,000 mass graves, right? India refuses these special, mechanisms to come and visit here. India refuses the monitoring by the international monitoring agencies to see whether the elections in Kashmir are conducted in free or fair manner. India has been always very, no country has the absolute sovereignty.
Will I get an opportunity to speak?
Yes, you will. The man's finishing his point. So finish your point, sir.
Country. Human rights violations are not internal affairs of any country. India cannot brush aside. And these Zafar Saab and others, we can understand their compulsion. But we are saying that as a Kashmiri, I'm saying that where 70,000 people have got killed, where 8,000 people have disappeared, where we have nearly 200 torture survivors here, and committed by the 700,000 security forces here with complete impact.
Okay, so
it's a matter of concern for the international community.
Okay, fair point.
International.
Okay, I'm going to get a response. Certainly, I'm going to get a response from Syed Zafar Islam. Syed Zafar Islam, let me add to that a question from the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein. He says, how is it that a country that prides itself on its democratic institutions has not allowed a single trial in nearly 28 years of armed forces personnel accused of serious violations, including killings, rape, torture, and enforced disappearances? Go ahead.
Well, let me respond to that. First of all, I would request the Human Rights Commissioner of United Nations to pay attention to Balochistan, where the actual human rights violation is taking place and nobody in the world is actually bothered about it.
That's deflection. You're talking about Pakistan. We're talking about Kashmir.
No, I'm not. No, agreed. I'm coming back to that. It's very unfortunate that people are, where there is no human rights violation, the people are trying to paint such thing.
We do programs about Pakistan all the time. We hold people from Pakistan to account all the time.
Now
we're talking about Kashmir.
Let me come back to see, Kashmir, you have to understand the dynamics in Kashmir. After the election, it was a fractured mandate. It was difficult for us to form the government. It was difficult for PDP or for that other political party. It was difficult for them. The kind of fractured mandate was given by the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Yet, despite all the differences with the PDP and the ideological differences, we had set aside all the differences, all the contentious issues. We actually set aside and we formed the government only in the interest of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, because we wanted to overall development of the Jammu and Kashmir. Which Jammu and Kashmir has remained isolated from all the developmental activities taking place in the country. We wanted the people of Jammu and Kashmir to be part of the mainstream, and that's why we formed the government, and it was working fine. But Pakistan, separatist forces, now people are talking about to talk to separatist forces. We want to talk to everyone on the earth, but within the constitutional framework of the country. We cannot be dictated, a country cannot be dictated that they should talk on a terms and conditions posed by them. No, there's a constitution within the country for the government for the country, and within the constitutional framework, we are happy to engage anywhere. But they do not respect the constitution. They do not respect the sovereignty of the nation. How can you engage a person who does not respect his own nation?
Okay.
And they are working against the interests of the nation and compromising with the interests of the nation, and colliding with who? The terrorist organization, and supporting them.
I've got to come in here. Unfortunately, I don't like the fact that you didn't address what I asked from the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, but unfortunately, we're out of time now. For the moment, I have to thank you, gentlemen, because I have to move on. Syed Zafar Islam, Wahid Para, and Parvez Imroz, thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers. Still ahead on the program, why filming Israeli soldiers could land you in prison for 10 years. And the Pakistani Taliban appoints a new leader. Are they now more dangerous under Mufti Noor Wali Mehsud? A right-wing party in Israel says videos of its soldiers attacking Palestinians have become far too commonplace and break the spirit of Israeli soldiers. So instead of putting a stop to the abuses caught on film, Israel's politicians have another plan: ban the videos. Legislation now being debated in parliament could make filming the Israeli army a crime and punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Human rights groups say if the bill becomes law, it will eliminate one of the few ways to hold soldiers accountable. Haider Abbasi reports.
This Palestinian man filmed lying on the ground is wounded. But that doesn't stop this Israeli soldier from shooting him in the head. Sergeant Elor Azariah was convicted of manslaughter for the killing of Abdel Fattah al-Sharif 2 years ago. Just minutes before he was killed, Sharif had been shot and disarmed. He was accused of stabbing an Israeli soldier in the occupied West Bank city of Hebron. Sharif's killing was filmed by the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, something that probably wouldn't have happened under a proposed bill. That bill would ban anyone filming Israeli soldiers. The draft legislation says anyone caught photographing, filming or recording Israeli soldiers on duty to damage their spirit could be jailed for 5 years. And if the intention is to harm Israel's national security, the sentence will be raised to 10 years. The bill has already passed the initial stage in Israel's parliament, the Knesset. But there's been an intense backlash.
The question for Israeli officials is quite simple. If they consider their army to be the most moral in the world, why are they afraid of a degree of scrutiny over the army's tactics in the West Bank and in Gaza? The answer is quite clear.
The last few months have been seen as especially damaging for Israel. During the Great March of Return protests in Gaza, at least 131 Palestinians were killed by Israeli forces, including 15 children. Israeli snipers also shot dead 2 journalists reporting on the rallies. Many of the killings were filmed by activists. The bill specifically mentions the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem as being anti-Israeli and pro-Palestinian. The NGO hands out cameras to volunteers who film Israeli soldiers and their interactions with Palestinians.
I began to notice that when the army and settlers saw someone filming, there would be fewer assaults. There would become less violence.
Critics say the law would give Israeli soldiers a free hand to abuse Palestinians without the fear of any consequences.
This bill is not only draconian, I think it's also exceptionally stupid in the sense that, we live in 2018. Any person with a cell phone is now an activist, a journalist. Does the government really think that Palestinians that live under this regime will stop taking pictures?
So is the bill justified to stop activists from obstructing Israel's military? Or is it a way to end Israeli soldiers from being held to account? Haider Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
Let's begin the discussion by speaking to Peter Lerner, a former Israeli army spokesman who joins us now from Tel Aviv. Good to have you on The Newsmakers, Peter. So, essentially, is this bill saying instead of holding soldiers to account for abuses, let's just hide it. Let's just ban people from filming our soldiers and protect them and not break their spirit? Is that what's happening here?
Absolutely not. What we're actually seeing is a process that happens in the Israeli democracy where you see a bill suggested to the government and the government reviews it and then it comes back to parliament and eventually the end product is completely different to the beginning product.
Well, we know what the roots of it are. The roots are saying we don't want to break the spirit of our soldiers because we see too many videos of our soldiers beating people up and attacking people. We don't like it. That's the roots of it. Just because it goes through a democratic process doesn't mean that at its inception it isn't pretty icky, right?
I would say that there are actually 2 reasoning behind this bill. The first one would be populist politics, which is, of course, the politicians want to be the defenders of the defenders. They want to show to their electorate what they are doing in order to safeguard the soldiers on the ground. On the other hand, you have the operational component. And I think it's really interesting that we haven't heard what the military think about this bill. There has been no statement, no position, nothing that has been voiced publicly, and the military here know how to do that when that is the situation. And on the other hand, when you think about the military situation, their reality on the ground is one where, in fact, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict over the years is probably the most covered conflict in the world. And the military has been operating in a situation which is extremely difficult. So I don't think personally from my experience that the military have a strong position against this. And I think what we will see is more political action on the political level, but we will see at the end of the day, we'll see something much watered, much down, which will suggest that the soldiers will be able to conduct their law enforcement activities without being hindered by thousands and hundreds and sometimes the influence of cameramen that are trying to sometimes get into the news rather than being people that are following the news.
Let me ask you very directly, as someone who was in the hot seat, was defending the IDF or the Israeli army at a time of conflict during the Gaza war and beyond. You were held to account. You were somebody who was all about transparency. You were all about check the footage, right? You were all about trying to defend what Israel was doing. This can't sit well with you because it looks like this is the government trying to cover things up. You want transparency, don't you, Peter?
I would absolutely agree with the understanding that Israel is a democracy, and as a democracy, we will operate under the watchful eye of the world media, of Israeli media, and when it's critical, it will be critical. And when we need to do things better, we will do things better. So I would definitely suggest that there is definitely room for improvement, but I would say the reality on the ground suggests, sometimes being on the ground with those cameras, while they contain some of the military activities, they serve sometimes to aggravate the situation of the rioters and protesters. Whereas we've seen frequently when there are cameras on the ground, you see people becoming more violent, more extremist, using more means to attack, to shoot at, to throw firebombs at the forces because they feel empowered sometimes by the presence of a camera. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I don't think the military have, as I said, they haven't said and put forward a prominent position on this issue. And I expect that they will not say that. And from a military's perspective, they understand that the area is saturated with cameras. It's a reality. It's an operational reality. But politicians will continue to do the political work.
Okay, Peter Lerner, thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Let's broaden out the discussion now and bring in former Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister, Ambassador Danny Ayalon. In Paris, we have the Middle East representative of Reporters Without Borders, Sophie Amuth. And joining us from West Jerusalem is Matan Peleg, the CEO of Im Tirtzu, a grassroots Zionist organization claiming credit for the bill. I thank you all for joining us. Matan Peleg, let me start with you. You must be proud. You guys helped table and push this through. But when you think about it, it looks as if you're trying to hide any potential accountability for Israeli soldiers. That's it, isn't it?
Israel suffers from a very problematic phenomena. There is a very big difference between a reporter, someone who uses a camera to do his job, than an anarchist who uses a camera only as a tool to go and harass our soldiers in the borders. Now, because all those anti-Israeli organizations and activists start to learn that if they're holding a camera, they can go whatever they want and go very close to the soldiers. They just use it again and again. So what we decided to do is promote the need of a kind of a bill like this, because there is, again, a very big difference between a reporter who's doing his job and it is very legit, than someone who's just using a camera to do propaganda, to harass our soldiers in their war, and this is just unacceptable.
If I can ask you, B'Tselem, Maxim Watch Women, and Breaking the Silence, all Israeli human rights groups, do you consider them anti-Israeli groups? Because they are affected by this. They go and they film and document.
First of all, they are not human rights organizations at all. Those are propaganda organizations that are funded from foreign governments from Europe. They get money to do propaganda against Israel.
That's
and I'm not talking about their organizations, but I'm talking about but I'm talking about the activity. When B'Tselem or Breaking the Silence are coming with their cameras, if it's not bothering the soldiers from a far distance or something, I think it's okay. But when they're using the cameras to go very, very close to the soldiers, and it makes the soldier not focus on the mission, then it's risky.
Okay, but these are all hypotheticals. Interesting. I've heard from you and Peter Lerner all these hypotheticals. What if it bothers the soldier? What if it creates a situation where it's not great for the soldier? We have lots of concrete examples of when cameras have shown very real things. Danny Ayalon. We have Ilor Azaria execute someone who was already neutralized and wounded. We've had a disabled Palestinian have his wheelchair tipped over, an 8-year-old Palestinian girl having her bicycle taken away by soldiers. These were all caught on camera. We have concrete evidence, Danny Ayalon, of these things, and no evidence really of these hypotheticals of breaking the spirit of the soldiers. As a former ambassador, Danny Ayalon, as a former ambassador, as a former deputy foreign minister, this is not a good look, is it? I'm certain you don't like this bill.
Well, many in Israel do not like it. You know, Israel is really a free, pluralistic, democratic society, and about all those incidents that you mentioned, all those were brought into justice, and Ilor Azaria was sitting in jail. I would say that by and large, of course, we have nothing to hide, and we would like to see the press working as a press. But I think there is here something to say about provocation. And, you know, when you talk about a military area or an area of conflict, it is not just in Israel, but all over the world. They cordon off, they close the area. And unfortunately, you know, we are in a very, very complex situation with the Palestinians, because terrorists are embedded among these civilians, and when they see cameras, they would like to provoke, and sometimes, of course, there is some ramifications. Okay. But I can tell you one thing is that the bill, you know, is just in a very initial stage, and if it comes to the Knesset with all the readings, usually there is a lot of changes and moderations, because, you know, we have here not just the Knesset, you know, in the democracy you have a division of powers. So we have
Mr.
also the Supreme Court, which can nix some...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've heard this from Peter Lerner as well. You're both telling me in a democratic system, there's checks and balances, it will get watered down. That doesn't mean that the bill doesn't sting, right? I mean, you still have to admit that. You can't say that just because...
The bill is too soft.
Oh, okay, so we have Matan Pelek believing it's too soft. But Mr. Ayalon, that does not take away from the fact that the bill's just a bad bill, right?
Yes, I would say the litmus test is the Supreme Court in Israel. If the Supreme Court in Israel accepts it from this constitutional point of view, you know, with the freedom of movement, freedom of speech, and all the other freedoms, then I would accept it. If not, of course, there will be some kind of a dilemma, a crisis between the authorities, but the rule of law always prevails.
Okay, Sophie Anmuth, you've been listening to various interpretations of this, and there seems to be a trend here where we're hearing that from many of the gentlemen here, there's a conflation. They're not so certain that a lot of people who claim to be reporters are actually reporters, and a lot of people who claim to be documenting the Israeli army's activities as human rights groups are there for good reason. Your response to that is what?
Well, our response to that is, of course, this bill hasn't been passed yet, as you just said, but from what we see in it now, and from what these two gentlemen said as well, it seems that if a journalist ends up doing some work that is provocative, then maybe he's not really a journalist, which sounds a bit odd. I understand that they are talking about organizations that are not organizations of journalists. However, journalists often use material that has been filmed by citizen journalists or eyewitnesses. So then it would become illegal to use this material, and then being a citizen journalist would become illegal as well. And also what the bill says now, it's the intention that will say if it is criminalized or not. But how will you determine the intention of the person? Mm-hmm. Will you say, oh, for this person, we know their political views, so surely they wanted to harm the morale of the soldiers or the security of Israel? So we think in this state, this bill is worrying, and it could indeed curb free speech and violate the right to inform.
Right. Matan Peleg, this is what B'Tselem says in response to the bill. If occupation embarrasses the government, then it should take steps to end it. Visual documentation of life under occupation shall continue. It's a fact of life that no stupid bill will succeed in changing. Mr. Peleg, what do you think?
Yeah, so again, I will give you just a short example. In Mount Hadar, not far from Jerusalem, it was a terror attack. Right before the terror attack, it was a few women from Mahsom Watch organization go to checkpoints, and they went to harass the soldiers and went called them a lot of names and cursed them. I think there is a difference between a reporter and someone who just wants to undermine the soldier's spirit. A reporter is someone that is professional, is coming to do his job. It is very easy to see the difference between them. And again, Israel is a democracy. Israel is a state who provides more human rights than any other country in the Middle East. Israel provides stability for all the people that lives here. This is a great country, and we need to defend it. Unfortunately, because of terror and because of the resistance of the corrupted PLO, there are a lot of tragedies and violence in Judea and Samaria and in Gaza because of the Hamas, and this is their fault. We are always try to do peace with our neighbors. If they choose other things, they will get hurt. What to do? Again,
okay. What to do? Let me let that be the end of your answer. Danny Ayalon, I want to ask you very specifically about the wording of the bill. It says anyone who films, photographs and or records soldiers in the course of their duties with the intention of undermining the spirit of IDF soldiers and residents of Israel shall be liable to 5 years imprisonment. Now, all those examples, Mr. Ayalon, that I gave you earlier on of Elor Azaria, of various Israeli soldiers and policemen doing terrible things caught on camera, arguably, all those things undermine the spirit of the protagonists.
Not a terrible thing. To shoot a terrorist is not a bad thing.
He executed a man who was already neutralized and injured, but we're not here to go through...
He shoot a terrorist.
We're not here to discuss it. He only got 9 months anyway. That could be another discussion anyway. Despite that, because you're disagreeing here with an Israeli court that sentenced him. But Danny Ayalon, back to my point. Isn't that very dangerous Orwellian language? Because arguably, any of those incidents can be deemed to be undermining the spirit of the soldiers. You can't defend that, can you?
Well, actually, you know, the bill, the wording actually has been copied in many democratic countries. When military offensive or military action is taking place, they close the area. You know, if you look in Afghanistan or in Iraq or even at the Kurdish areas in Syria, when the Turks invaded there, you don't see reporters there because they close off the area. Here in Israel, we have never wanted to close the areas because we really have nothing to hide. But when we see that this, let's say, openness is being abused, then I think you have to take some measures. But I can assure you that the Israeli legal system and also the Israeli military legal systems, which is not under the command of the Chief of Staff. The military justice department is under the Attorney General of the state. So they are an independent authority, and so far they have been quite effective in deterring and in also bringing into justice anyone who was out of line. You know, there are exceptions to the rule.
But to the point of my question,
we saw Abu Ghraib and all others.
Okay, certainly. But to the point of my question, and you know, you talk about closing off areas. I think it's very difficult to close off East Jerusalem and the West Bank, occupied under international law, settlements all over the place. Very different situation. But let's not go down that rabbit hole. But to the point of my question, the wording of the bill itself. If you had to vote on it, if you were sitting as an MK in Parliament, you're a member of the Knesset, if you had to vote for that wording, would you vote for it, yes or no?
Well, I would probably consult with the legal department. You know, the legal is also, the Knesset also has a legal advisor, which is also an independent. I would like to compare it to other countries, and I would only compare it to democratic countries, not to authoritarian countries. And of course, once you bring everything onto the scale, you know, it's a mixed bags, and then you try to find the best way, the kind of the best way forward, which would take care of both human rights issues and both the soldiers' protection.
Sophie Anmuth, as Reporters Without Borders, what would you like the Israeli government to do?
We would like them to say, well, it's the Knesset who will decide on this law, but the Israeli government first has given its approval, and then Tzechi Hanegbi has said that this law would actually damage the freedom of the press. So I think the government is trying to take a positive step, and we would like them to actually say, yes, this bill is not necessary because there are really laws to protect the soldiers, there are laws against insults, defamation, and whatever. So this law doesn't seem to be necessary.
Okay, Sophie Anmuth, Matan Peleg, Danny Ayalon, and earlier Peter Lerner, I sincerely thank you all for joining us here on The Newsmakers. A religious scholar known for opposing polio vaccines and promoting violence against healthcare workers is now in charge of the Pakistani Taliban. Mufti Noor Wali Mehsud's promotion comes a week after his predecessor was killed in a US-Afghan airstrike. He takes over the militant group at a time when it's politically weak and rife with internal divisions. So, how will Mehsud impact the Taliban? Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by the former commander of Pakistan's anti-terrorism forces, retired Major General Ejaz Awan. And with me here in the studio is Imtiaz Gul, the founder and executive director of the Center for Research and Security Studies. Gentlemen, great pleasure having you both on the Newsmakers. Imtiaz Gul, before we talk about Mehsud, let me ask you first of all about Mullah Fazlullah, the drone strike, the impact of that man's death. How dangerous was that man?
Well, the man had been dangerous in the past, of course, but I think ever since the Pakistan Army launched its operation in June 2014, he had been on the run. The space had been shrinking on him considerably as a result of the sequenced operations by the military in different areas. So I think he had become an eyesore, of course, for the Pakistani armed forces, because he had been operating all his, conducting and commanding the operations inside Pakistan while sitting across the border in somewhere in northeastern Afghanistan. So, and he was also a point of contention between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and it was a recurring subject between whenever the officials from both sides spoke.
Right. Ejaz Awan, Mufti Noor Wali Mehsud, tell me what you think of him. What kind of leader can we expect him to be of the Pakistani Taliban, and what kind of threat will he be to Pakistan?
Well, thank you very much. In fact, there is not going to be any major difference because his three predecessors, that is Hakimullah Mehsud, Baitullah Mehsud, Hakimullah Mehsud, and Fazlullah, they were all very ruthless terrorists, cold-blooded murderers and killers. So from that point of view, the structure of the organization, that is Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, is not going to change much. Their policies are not going to change much, and they are going to remain a threat, and they would continue creating instability inside Pakistan. So leadership at this stage, I think, does not matter much. Each one of them has the same agenda to strike terror, target the innocent people inside Pakistan. So from that point of view, I would not say, if I have to rate, it would not escalate any further, or he would not be more dangerous than his earlier predecessors. It would be one and the same thing.
Okay, Imtiaz Gul, is it clear to you that Tehrik-i-Taliban has been weakened? Because yes, they don't seem to be as capable as they were in the past of setting off explosions in Karachi and Lahore and elsewhere, but is it clear to you that they are a weaker organization?
I think the statistics support the claims and our position that this organization has been considerably degraded, and it has lost the wherewithal that it used to have until 2011 and 12. It is more fragmented today compared to what it was with Baitullah Mehsud and Hakimullah Mehsud. And the fact that they had to bring in Wali Mehsud again back to the top is probably one way of trying to control the damage that this organization has endured in the past few years. But I don't think they will be as lethal as in the past. However, as long as they serve as the proxies for external forces, they will remain a potent threat to Pakistan.
Proxies for whom?
Proxies for those countries which have problem with Pakistan. It could be India, it could be Afghanistan, it could be...
Are they doing that, in your opinion?
Well, I think this is there's a very method in the madness that the TTP imposed on Pakistan, but I think the Pakistani armed forces very successfully dismantled the infrastructure, the network of terror that TTP had mounted with the external support. And if you look at the pattern of violence that this organization ramped up, the only objective of this was to inject fear into the minds of Pakistanis and to destabilize Pakistan. And I think Pakistan has now, meanwhile, gotten quite a good handle on that.
Okay. Ijaz Awan, is the claim true that Pakistan has a handle on the Pakistani Taliban? It's degraded the threat, it's managed to contain it successfully, but at the same time, it's supporting the other Taliban across the border in Afghanistan?
I would agree with the first part of your question. We have degraded them. We have dismantled their structure inside Pakistan. And I was commanding that operation in Swat against Mullah Fazlullah and Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan in Malakand division. I led that operation. At that time, I was commanding an infantry division. So we degraded their capability. We liberated that area from them, and normalcy was returned. This person, along with his few other terrorists and the leaders of that organization, they escaped to Afghanistan. And for the last 9 years, they are there in Afghanistan. They were staying there. The second part that you are saying, that we degraded them and we support others, is an absolutely ridiculous thing to say. I am sorry, I have to use this term. There is no such organization that Pakistan is supporting across its borders. We are committed principally to this fight on terror, and our cooperation with the coalition forces, American-led coalition forces, is principle-based. We are not allowing anyone to use our homeland against terrorism, for terrorism, against any other country, may it be anyone. So we are not supporting them. We are not allowing them. We have operated in the 7 agencies. We have carried out 7 to 8 major operations, including the last one, Zarb-e-Azm, and now we are carrying out search and cordon operation throughout the country, that is Radul Fasad. Right. So there is no question of supporting any organization that is operating in Afghanistan.
Okay, so Imtiaz, go. Are the Americans and the Afghans wrong in claiming that you're fighting one Taliban but supporting another?
I mean, they are, I think, describing the problem.
They are absolutely wrong.
Okay.
They're describing, putting a different spin on the problem. There are many leaders who are moving back and forth between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And the very fact that Americans and the Afghans have been asking Pakistan to help in the process of reconciliation and peace in Afghanistan implicitly concedes that, yes, many Taliban leaders may be in Pakistan. But I think Afghanistan and the United States have crossed that threshold when they now, of late, have requested Pakistan for help. And that's why we see a big thaw in the bilateral relations, with General Pompeo calling up Pakistan Army Chief, and which I call an SOS by the Americans, because they've realized that 17 years of direct military confrontation and the pursuit of military option has been futile.
Okay. Ijaz Awan, let me ask you about tactics and whether they work. So we spoke about Mullah Fazlullah killed in a drone strike, and we asked you about his successor, Mufti Noor Wali Mehsud. What type of man will he be? And you said, well, you know, it's going to be more of the same. They just appoint another guy and we'll see the same thing. So it begs the question, is the tactic of just taking out these guys via drone strikes the wrong thing to do, because it's like a game of whack-a-mole? They just pop up again and there's somebody else and it keeps on regenerating. Do you support the drone strikes or not?
Well, I do support the drone strikes. I recommend such actions against them. But then let's see, in 17 years, has the terrorism reduced or it has expanded, it has massivized into other countries in the region, in the Middle East, in the African countries? Has American policy of dealing with them by sheer use of force, has it been successful? The answer is no. Are they any less organized in Afghanistan today? The answer is no. They were originally Afghan Taliban, and now there is a presence of Daesh in Afghanistan, there is presence of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, then there are Afghan Taliban and now Tehrik-i-taliban. Pakistan also, when they ran from here, they escaped into Afghanistan. So they have expanded, they have multiplied, and they have not really shrunk. The mere fact that they are controlling more than 45% of area of Afghanistan where the Afghan government or Americans have no access, that shows that their policy of use of force against these forces has not paid off. And there is no military solution to this war in Afghanistan or in the region.
Okay,
so
no military solution, certainly. And no military solution
Yes.
to this war. Coming from a military man, it's been interesting to hear. Gentlemen, I really appreciate you both coming onto the Newsmakers. It's been a great chat. Ijaz Awan and Imtiaz Gul. I've got a wrap. I thank you very much. That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Next time, we ask if Hungary's government is xenophobic after it passes a law which could send you to jail for helping undocumented migrants. But before we go, a series of murals have been spray painted recently across Paris depicting the plight of refugees. The stencils come from none other than Banksy. And we leave you with this glimpse of the anonymous artist's newest works.